folks, thanks for tuning in for another cruise with Smooth. Before I get into what I'm thinking about today, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Today is we're heading back to work. My shift is after our summer maintenance shutdown. We was off for, let me think, we were off, 7 weeks plus 2? I've been off a total of 10 weeks so far this year. And I've got a couple normal company holidays coming up, as well as they normally let us off like Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and then that week between Christmas and New Year's Day. And we go back on the 2nd, so I'll have been off for almost 3 months this year. Granted, a lot of that was paid in unemployment, but 3 months off work, it's crazy. Anyway, I heard an interesting quote yesterday. The guy was talking more about interpersonal relationships, like he equated it specifically to like a spouse. But basically, the quote was, don't strive for victory, strive for peace. And the way he said, if you and your spouse are having a disagreement on something, don't try to be the one that comes out on top. Try to be the one that comes to a negotiated peace agreement, basically. It's like, because you've got to live with them. And that's, no fun if you're living with someone that you just won a big fight and you won, but the cost of victory was high because now they're mad at you and resent you for winning. And I think that if you want to expand that a little bit, that could be part of the problem with the two-party system, because most people, now there are exceptions to the rule, a lot of the pundits and the people that stay very up to speed on politics are the exception, but most people are, Democrat or Republican, and they watch a debate or two or a speech or two and they go in and pull the lever and that's it. And it is very much Democrat or Republican versus the other side all the time. So I think that's part of the problem with the two-party system that we currently have. But I think that if everybody that was in elected office was a touch more reasonable on things, like, okay, and this is just something I'm passionate about, something that I'm informed about, something that I am familiar with, where a lot of people that debate this or not, firearms. I own firearms. I carry firearms, and I enjoy shooting. Wife and I had a little bit of a trick shot shoot off on the 4th of July. We were shooting at a bowling pin, which is an amazing target because they are surprisingly very tough against rifle projectiles, which I wasn't expecting. And you always know when you hit it, because no matter where you hit it, they fall over. Well, she set one of them up behind a log, and so only the top third was visible, so it's a very small, very narrow target. She said, "There's your trick shot." I got her. and she didn't. So, but anyway, talking about guns, you know, a lot of that they talk about common sense gun control. Well, a lot of people assume that just because the background check process doesn't take a lot of time doesn't mean it's not in depth. It's reported to a federal system, and that's how it works, and it works really fast. There's a ton of laws there's more laws on the books for guns now than there ever have been. And when you look behind the terror of one of those, of, you know, any gun crime, someone broke most of the time over 2 laws to do what they did. They took a gun into a place they weren't supposed to. They weren't supposed to have guns to begin with. They murdered somebody. So there's a ton of uninformed conversation on firearms. You know, make it something that everybody can relate to. Sorry, I'm getting choked up. Allergies are kicking in or something. Make it something that everybody can relate to. How many people in here have ever sped? Okay, there's laws against it. They set speed limit signs. They set fines for exceeding the speed limit. They set fines for turn signal violations and everything else. How many people do it anyway? Granted, it's not a heinous crime, but whenever you speed, you do increase your risk in a lot of cases. But most people speed to one degree or another. So they could write some of the most restrictive and ridiculous laws about speeding or, you know, traffic violations, but there's still going to be those people that are going to break those laws no matter the punishment. And I think that's kind of where we're at on firearms. Realistically, you can take a guy, a nut that walks into any establishment with a gun with the intent to kill people. The likelihood that he's going to meet an equal and opposite force is very slim in a lot of states and in a lot of places. If everybody that could qualify to own a handgun could legally carry a concealed handgun, that guy's not going to know who's armed, and he might not get to kill anybody before he himself gets dead. So I think that the discussion that we're having there's somewhat disingenuous, and there's a lot of data to prove it, but I think that if everybody in DC had strove for peace with the other party, like, okay, there's lots of arguments to be made about proposals from both Democrats and Republicans. There's good and bad sides to proposals by Democrats and Republicans. And to not do a thing strictly because it was written by someone that sits on the other side of the aisle and you're not going to let them win. Merit, you know, do it based on its merits, not on who wrote it. Our politics is getting so partisan that if you want anything with a Democrat name to write it to pass, you've got to vote in all Democrats, and same for Republicans. So it just something that I was thinking about after hearing that, you know, strive for peace. And if everybody would be willing to have reasonable conversations about these things instead of mudslinging and name calling, I think that we would be in a lot better place politically and socially, because we, the American people, would see our elected leaders talking about their opposing party in a way that wasn't cruel, harsh, or maligning. I remember when this was several years back, Donald Trump tried to get several repeals of Obamacare done, and none of them happened, to my recollection. I think the only thing they got rid of was the mandate and the penalty for not having insurance. Well, anyway, there is an argument for and against Obamacare. And I've heard this analogy multiple times. You can have universality in healthcare, you can have quality healthcare, or you can have cheap healthcare. You get to pick two. So you can have cheap universal that's crummy, you can have good universal that's expensive, you can have quality cheap healthcare that's not universal. You get my point. So anyway, there's old speeches of Elizabeth Warren yapping about this healthcare bill, or this repeal bill, and she's saying that this is blood money to the insurance companies and the corporate medical corporations, that people will die and blah blah blah. And I'm not an expert on it. I'm no expert in healthcare. The only thing I noticed when healthcare changed is my insurance premiums doubled every month, and my copays went up. I had the same. My copays went up like $10 a doctor's visit, but it went up. My premiums went up a little bit each month, and I could see the same. I couldn't. I couldn't see the same doctor, but I had the same basic coverage, aside from the fact that my premiums and copays went up. So I'm no expert in all that, but I think that just throwing shade like that at someone that's trying to do something that would be a net benefit to a lot of people, it could be a net negative to a lot of people. But there needs to be a more informed discussion than just people will die. People have always died. People will always die. People have died since there were people. So I've heard a theory that the multiverse theory, which basically, if you pull out of your driveway and make a right-hand turn, there's a universe that exists parallel to ours in which you pulled out and made a left-hand turn, and in every subsequent decision for the day that's different, that's another universe. Well, right now we live in the dumbest universe, and I kind of agree with that. So I think that more level-headed conversation. Look, if someone can calmly, without emotional appeal, lay a intellectual smackdown on somebody, I am way more likely to listen to their opinion than them screaming racist, Hitler, Nazi, people will die, you have blood on your hands, when it's patently obvious that they don't. So that's kind of what I got to say today, folks. I think I'm done for today. So anyway, strive for peace, not victory. Y'all take care, folks. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in for another Cruise with Smooth.